So this is a step-by-step guide to successful self-publishing, or how to fail and succeed without any marketing money, because that's a reality of self-publishing. You spend all your time developing your game, and then you don't have the expertise in marketing, and you definitely don't have the cash. So self-publishing is very much an indie perspective on things. Oh, I should also say this. This lecture is not your typical, this guy talks forever and then we ask questions. If you find something that you want to ask about, please just raise your hand right away, and I'll give you the word. Please, sir. Full name? Right. Well, I was going to say we're going to spend the next 48 hours practicing it. It's either that or game jamming. It takes just as long. This is the name. This is the worst named CEO of Europe's worst named studio. Really? Maybe that's better. It's not that easy, but it's not that hard. It's Sigurgeirsson. Yeah. Well, it's not half as difficult as the first name, because it's not really pronounced Brjann, it's Brjann. You have to do sort of an African swallowing at the end. So Brjann. That's actually how Brjann was pronounced 1,000 years ago, because we Icelanders, we sort of kept the correct spellings of things, and then the British fucked it up. Now, I'm just going to do a real brief about Image&form first, how we've sort of evolved. We started in '97 as a multimedia company. In 1997, the first version of PowerPoint came out, I think, and so we were doing quite a bit of multimedia work around then. And then the web came and messed everything up for us. So we weren't a multimedia studio anymore. We were sort of became a web studio. And then I really wanted to get into game development, because that's what I'd been dreaming about since I was 12 or 13, when I made my first really, really stupid and small games. And I really wanted to do it professionally, because I always thought it was cool. I was sitting at home trying to make games that were interesting. So in 2002, we got a chance to save a kids game, edutainment game. And then we sort of kept working for that publisher, and we made some 25, 30 edutainment games, work for hire, or as it's called here, outsourcing, that type of work we did. And I had some really good people working at Image&form, but doing these kids games, it was creatively, it wasn't very much fun. You can imagine, just sort of drawing the same beautiful bunny character the whole time, and you just want to kill that bunny after a while. Like after 3 titles, you're done, but after 25, you're ready to go postal about it. And there's another thing that's really important, and it means that if you're working for a publisher who is always giving you work, it means that you're never going to get any real recognition as a developer. You will be a production house for that publisher, and it's not a win-win situation, really. It is in a sense, because you can make a lot of money doing that, but at the end of the day, you're not able to work on your own ideas, and it's sort of, you just grow older with every game you make, and it's a terrible feeling to sort of see your life slipping away, and then you are there on your deathbed, and nobody loves you, and you die. No, what I mean is that you really want to take something home, right? It's to be somebody. Oh, by the way, I always forget this. So everybody with a cell phone now has to go to Twitter and follow us. The Facebook is actually really simple too. It's just facebook.com/imageform. But then something really great happened. Sorry, man in orange shirt, please. Of my first game, my very first game when I was 12 years old. Sorry, is that what you're asking? Because I'm not sure if I'm going to tell you. Yeah. The first game that we produced as a work for hire studio was called Josephine and the Dinosaurs. The next one was Josephine in the Forest. And third one was Josephine Learns Math. Josephine and her favorite M60 machine gun. A lot of Josephine games, actually, yeah. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. East European market, maybe. But then something great happened. Apple set up the App Store with the iPhone, and it was a true revolution in every sense of the word, because it just meant that before, being a developer, it was really hard to sort of reach the end consumer without a lot of middlemen, and now this possibility arose. I think our friends at Chilingo, they can show you 100 cases where they've shown that it's really beneficial still to work together with a publisher. So it doesn't mean that everything got turned on its head, but it really opened up opportunities. We all know this. So we made some iOS games. These are two of them, and they were pretty shitty, actually. They weren't that great. The one to the right there, Mariachi Hero, is a really fun dance game, but we got slammed for racial stereotyping. This is one of the cases where if we had talked to a publisher or had a producer tell us, or just had talked to somebody about it, they would have told us that straight away, and we wouldn't have been so surprised. So that's also one of the advantages, working together with people with lots of experience in the industry. But then, in 2011, we struck gold. We released a game called Antil on iOS, and it was picked by Apple as iPad Game of the Week when we released. And just prior to releasing that game, we actually had a discussion with Chilingo. And it was, I talked to your colleague, Ed Rumley, I think. Is he still with you? Brilliant, brilliant guy. I really like him. He turned us down because he said the characters aren't likable enough. And he really had a point. He wasn't rude or anything. He had actually sent me a list of, you should think about these things in the game. We're not going to go for this game, but this is how you can improve the game. That was a fantastic approach, I thought. The guy's not going to go for the game, but still he's willing to come with some great input. Of course, we had to release the game as it was without sort of taking any of his advice really seriously, because we were out of cash. We didn't have the time to make those changes, but it still turned into a really excellent game. It's still one of the highest rated games on the App Store. That was 2011. So, and that was for us, it was a turning point as well, because that was our first real effort at self-publishing. And while we're on the subject then, I'll discuss, if you're going to self-publish, then you don't want to make a lot of mistakes. You want to make everything right from the beginning. And we'd been working on this game very hard for a long time, and my wife was really pissed off at me. she was actually supposed to be here, so I didn't have this slide in here actually, but when she said she's not coming to Sofia, then I put it back in. So she was nagging that I was working too much, and I was never home, and I took never care of the house or the kids, and everything was really unfair. And so I said, okay, fine. When we're done with this game, I promise I'll take you to Paris. And so the game was released on October 6th, I think, 2011. October 8th, in the morning, I got on the plane to go to Paris to spend a weekend with my wife. And I've had a lot of stupid or bad ideas in my life, but that was probably the worst. One of the top 5 bad ideas that I've had, or sort of, I should have just faked illness or something, so I could have stayed home promoting the game, talking to the press, etc. Because the first few days on mobile are really, really vital. You have to sort of be present. You have to do it right, and even more, you have to have a plan before what you're going to do during those first crucial days. I was sitting in Paris drinking café au lait with my wife and crying crying inside the whole time because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, promoting my game. So that's probably step 1 in the step-by-step guide. It's if you have a game that becomes game of the week on the App Store, then don't take my wife to Paris. Then when we had a game out that was selected as Game of the Week, we thought we were rock stars and we couldn't do anything wrong after that. So we immediately started prototyping more game ideas. And they just didn't turn out right. We couldn't find the fun. As Will pointed out, you have to sort of you need to pinpoint the fun and sort of iterate around that. And they weren't fun enough. So we sort of lost confidence pretty quickly afterwards and reverted to doing work for hire. And this time it was with a publisher, and it didn't work out. We had a very bad relation with them, and we were suffering for half a year making this game that didn't turn out right. And that sort of cemented the firm belief that from now on, we should self-publish our games. We should never work with a publisher again. Unless Chilingo calls, of course, then we'll work with them. Sorry. So what happened then was that we felt that the App Store was changing. In 2011, paid games were still prevalent, meaning that they were still at one point, I remember seeing a slide that paid games accounted for 65% of the total revenue on the App Store, and free-to-play games was 35%, and it was changing. It was sort of the scale was tipping towards free-to-play, and every game developer I ever talked to everybody was making mobile games. Obviously, not everybody, but so many people were talking about mobile games. It was mobile, 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 mobile. And I felt that if it's going to go free to play, and at that point there were like hundreds of games coming out every day, and you guys must know how many games are coming out every day these days, right? What's the figure? Thousands. Okay, let's leave it at thousands. So it was just escalating. There were so many, it was getting so crowded on mobile, and we were so small, and we had sort of lost confidence in that we could do it again. We thought in the beginning, we thought automatically we can sort of recreate this success with any other game. But we felt that mobile maybe isn't for us. If it's going to go free to play, and we're going to self-publish, we don't have the monetization skills, And yeah. So we thought, if we're not going to publish the next game on mobile, what other platforms are there? And we looked at the Nintendo 3DS. I mean, if you compare the number of 3DS units out there in the world to the number of mobile units or tablets, it's ridiculous. It's very, very small. But we figured if we can make a really great game, then we can sort of be somebody. We can be a small fish in a small pond, a small fish that can grow in a small pond, instead of being a small fish in a huge ocean where everybody is. And also, I had this feeling that things had to change at some point. Everybody was going to mobile, and if nobody else is talking to Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft, then maybe it'll be quite easy for us to go and talk to them. And so we did, and they were changing because they were seeing a lot of hesitant developers that were not making money on mobile. And so Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft were sort of opening up to indie developers. And so that was in 2012, and in August 2013, we released this game called SteamWorld Dig. So it took us 16 years, but all of a sudden we were one of the most promising developers in the world, according to some sources, mainly my mother. Now, actually, it was a lot of the game press were saying that. So, and it was a brilliant game, and it was on the short list for Game of the Year discussions all over the world. So suddenly we felt that we had done something right. Before I go to this slide here, I'm just going to show you, if you don't mind, I'm going to do this animation trick here first, and then I'll do this. Question first to you. Has anyone here heard of a game called SteamWorld Dig? Great. Okay. So we're going to rule Bulgaria here now soon. There we go. So this is the trailer for that game.
In his search for answers, he dug up more than he bargained for. A digging. The caves. The gold. The women. The danger. The upgrades. Beverages, the explosions, even more digging. The showdown. SteamWorld Dig, a first-of-its-kind game.
I think there's room for applause there while I... So, what what we did with that game is this was for real our first. I mean, 16 years into having this company and 10 years of making games. We really had to do self-publishing right this time. And so, like most of you, we spend most of our time developing games. We sit there and we make the game, we make the game, we make the game, we make the game, and then it's finally the game is ready and it's time to start selling the game. And you realize that shit, we don't have anyone who's supposed to do that. So running this company, I had decided that, okay, I'm going to do that. But I was also involved in a bit of game development, and so I think I sent out one press release like 3 months before we were done with the game, and then nothing more. It's not very clever. So we were done by the end of June 2013, and then since we're in Sweden, everybody went on vacation in all of July. And I had the hardest summer of my life because all during those vacation months, I realized that I wasn't prepared at all for this, to actually be able to sell the game, to promote the game and market the game. So instead of taking vacation, I was in the office trying to get our Twitter count up from 70 followers to at least a few hundred that would listen to us. The 70 that I had was basically my mom and all her friends. And so I spent the summer trying to just gather journalist contacts and getting word out there about the game. It's really hard when you're small, but you have to start somewhere. So that's what I did, and then we got lucky. We had a lot of bloggers and so on liked the way the game looked, and so they wrote about it. And then we also, the plan was really simple: find the journalists, talk to them, and then also another thing, like we did a bit of guerrilla PR. We printed fake robotic money and a fake bribe letter and sent it to influential people in the games industry, or 6 or 7 people. I mean, you can hear how that sounds, right? It's not very much of a plan, and it surfaced after a while because people at Destructoid picked up on it and said, "There's this Swedish developer that is they're trying to bribe us," and it didn't sound very good. It didn't come out right. I thought it was going to be like, "Oh, they're so cute. Let's write shitloads about them," and it didn't work that way. But it sort of got turned around. It was the humor of it shone through, and we actually got some press about that. So I think when you make a game, you should think fresh. You should think not make a Me Too game, but also when you make PR and marketing for your game, that's what you should do as well. Try to sort of make something different. We also we bought a brand new 3DS and loaded the game onto there and sent it to Notch. Does anyone know Notch? Yeah, he's also a Swedish guy. He's this guy from Stockholm with a funny hat, and so we sent it to him and never heard anything back until 3 or 4 months later when I wrote on Twitter that this one character in the game, we modeled him after Notch, and then we killed him in the game because he didn't play the game on the 3DS that I sent to him. And then he actually replied and sent out to all his followers that that's not actually true. He said, I spent 10 hours straight in one session and loved the game, and everybody should pick this game up. So you can do weird things, and hopefully it can work out. And then also Nintendo was opening up. there was this race going on by now, who was the most indie-friendly among the traditional platform holders. So Nintendo and Sony, in particular, were trying to outdo each other with finding indies and lifting them up. And so the same day we released the game, they video broadcast, they narrated a full minute of the game. And I think it very much impacted sales of the game. Because for this game, I think people felt like they hadn't heard anything about this game, and then there were some really important people at Nintendo talking about it, so it must be really good. Luckily, it actually is pretty good. And so last year we spent porting the game to first to Steam, and then to PlayStation 4 and Vita, and then to Wii U. Hopefully, it's not official, so you can't tell anyone, but it's also coming out on Xbox One pretty soon. And obviously, we're now working on the next game in the SteamWorld series, a game called SteamWorld Heist, which is also set in the SteamWorld steampunk robot-y Western universe, but this time it's in space, and it's turn-based combat, obviously. Just gonna, if you please. I'll just show that real quick here as well. This is very short. Glad I didn't have to ask. Thank you. So that's the first half of my talk, I think. Now we sort of get to this step by step, what I think is important if you're going to self-publish. I should also mention that SteamWorld Heist is SteamWorld Dig never made it to tablets or mobiles, mainly because of the control scheme. We couldn't come up with a smooth transition to make it work on mobiles and tablets with the controls, and so we decided to sort of focus on the next game instead. This game, however, is going to work just fabulously on tablets. We're really confident that it will. So I just hope there's some publisher somewhere who wants to talk about this game at some point. And self-publishing usually means that one studio publishes their own games, and that's it. We've tried to do something a little inventive now in Gothenburg, Sweden, where we're at. There's this other developer called Zoink who've put out a really fabulous game called Stick It to the Man, and they're coming with Zombie Vikings later this year. And we're very similar. It's the CEO and me, we live very close to each other, and we're about the same age, and the studios are about the same size, and we have the same vision about games. So we try to pool our resources. We're not creating a new publishing company, but we're helping each other with PR and marketing and publishing activities. And I think that's pretty clever if you're going to self-publish. Find other developers in your neighborhood or close by, people that you like, and help each other out. You're not really competitors to each other. You're actually more of colleagues, and you should view each other as such. Well, not the next 48 hours, obviously, but in real life. if you can help each other out, I think that's great. There, the step by step. The first thing is, like, when you make the game, you got to make sure that the game is original. If you think you're going to get away with making a Me Too game, then I think it's a little bit dangerous. At the same time, I'm positive that there are a lot of companies making very much money off clones of Candy Crush Saga, for example, or games like that. But is that really what you want to be doing? Not me. So don't make clones. Get inspired by other games and borrow ideas. Let's call it borrow and not steal, okay? So you should be inspired by others, but don't make Me Too games. Make something original. Next one is you have to have a great team. This is, I mean, it all sounds like, yeah, of course, but we're not always in that position. You start your company together with your brother, and then he gets heavily addicted to drugs and so on, and you keep him on the team because he's your brother and you promised your ma that your little brother was still going to be on your team. It's like, yeah, that little brother has to go. If he's not really great, you can't be working with so-so people because it's going to affect the game. You got to be harsh. And be harsh against yourself too. Are you really the best at what you do? If you're not, make sure that you find your role and do it well. Third one is money. You can talk to fabulous publishers, obviously, and the money issue may be solved that way, that you split the income. But you can also live cheaply, I hope, and you can create your masterpiece in your spare time if you have to. If you have a studio and you're working on it, then and you need money, if the game is great enough and the team is great enough, I think chances are pretty good that you can come up with some financing somehow. And then when you talk to that financing person, you have to be at your best. Present not vague ideas, be very, very clear about what you want and what you're about to do. And then with platforms, you need to choose wisely. How many here are working on mobile games? Hand up. Great. How many are working on PC games? Great. How many are working on games for other platforms? All right, I'm just going to... One, great. I was just going to shut my computer and leave. It's something that you need to sort of... You got to think about that carefully. Look at the mechanics of the game. Like, for example, like I said before, SteamWorld Dig never made it to mobile or tablets because we thought we couldn't come up with a really good control scheme for it. And also look at if it's got perfect touch input, then it definitely should be a mobile or tablet game. But if you need to come up with workarounds for the controls for the platform, then maybe you should sort of think again to see where it's at its best. Also, like, is the game fabulous in HD, or is it in a small immersive experience? If it is, then maybe it's a handheld device, a mobile, etc. And also check out where the money is at. I mean, are you going to make money from the game? Also about platforms, it's the first time I sat down with a platform owner. It was in my case, it was Nintendo. And I was glad. I was wearing one of those dinner jackets or jackets because I was sweating like crazy, and I was sure they could just tell that here's this too old rookie that is really nervous about seeing us. Um, but they were polite enough not to point that out, that I was being very nervous. And after that first meeting, I realized something, and that's, they really want you. They want you to come with their ideas. You shouldn't be nervous. It's actually, they should be nervous that you're going somewhere else if they're not interested enough. You should really keep that with you. If you have a really great game idea, you're in the driving seat. You don't have to be arrogant or too cocky or anything, but just remember, you're carrying the goods. Then the game. It's just make sure that you don't stop after a while because you get tired, or you had to drive that little brother to detox or something and you never got around, but you could still release that version of the game. Just polish the game until it's really irresistible. If you have the stamina for it, if you can persevere that long, don't put out something that is just so. Make it count. If it is a good core gameplay mechanic, then make sure that it really looks good, that it sounds good, and that it plays good as it can. Because otherwise, it's just you didn't really deliver on the potential. It's like you release a game that had a lot of potential, but didn't live up to it really. You just keep at it. Then when you submit, make sure you do it right. If you're working on a mobile game, that submission process is very quick, and you get it back, and if something isn't right, they tell you what's wrong, and you fix it, and you submit it again, and you get a very quick process. That's all well and fine for mobile, but with the other platforms, we're talking very many weeks for these submissions. You submit it, and for example, Nintendo is extremely picky. I mean, if you have an extra space before a comma in the manual, they'll send it back to you and say, yes, please, could you resubmit everything? Thank you. And so just make sure that everything is gone, because in the end, it's going to have to be that anyway. So just make it right from the beginning. Just do it right. And then, since you are making games in the modern world, you have to be prepared to promote your game. It's like getting a publisher that's not a guarantee that the game is going to be promoted fabulously. No offense, really, but you also have a responsibility at that stage to make sure that the game is promoted just as well as it can be. And it means, as a game developer, you work very late hours finishing up the game, but you have to also be prepared when the game is ready to spend even more time in that promotion afterwards, because the publisher is going to ask you to do that as well. They're going to find the journalists and so on that should be talking to you, and you need to be ready to talk to them. And if you're doing it yourself, you need to be ready to find all those people to talk to and come up with ideas how you're going to reach out with the game. So that's in the making process. And like I said, it's like just get ready to sleep less. You can sleep when you're old like me. Then you got really talented people doing everything for you. But in the meantime, you should just be very ready. And it sort of links back to that stupid Paris trip. That's where I promised myself that I wouldn't book myself up for anything that didn't have to do with promoting our games for at least like a month or two after the release of the game, just to be on top of it. And then we get to the part of doing all this without money. It's not true, obviously. It's like I sit and work with this stuff, and I cost money for the company, and the other people in the company that are making marketing materials and so on, they cost money. So nothing is free, really. But it just means that you're minimizing your costs. So what can you do when you're small and you're not known by anyone? Well, one thing is to talk to other people in the industry. I mean, I'm standing here right now, and I'm not going to be here after Sunday. So I would suggest to you, all of you, that if you have any questions, then ask me now or afterwards, because I'll gladly help with whatever I can. And so, exactly, who do you know and who do they know? You can expand your network quite easily. Second one is pretty tricky. It's be interesting. Now, if you're not interesting, how are you going to do this? How are you going to become interesting? Suggestions? Get drugs? Oh, get drunk. Okay, it's better than get drugs. Yeah, it's more legal actually. Sorry? Yeah. Well, find the story in the game. Like what has happened during the who jumped out the window during the development of this game? Maybe not that, but find the interesting stuff about you, about the team, about the game. There's a lot to be told. That's one, be interesting. And the other one is be fun. Now, how do you become fun? The thing is, you have to sort of force yourself to be fun. When you communicate with people, be that fun guy. It doesn't cost you anything, and if you're fun towards someone who doesn't appreciate fun, then there's nothing wrong with you. You're probably talking to the wrong person. And there's a lot to be told about that. What I did with when I was emailing Nintendo in the beginning, I wrote to someone. We were supposed to meet at Gamescom in Germany, and at one point in the email I said, "Oh, I'm going to hug you so hard when we meet." It's like there's nothing dangerous, right? But there's a guy who's 47 now, right? I was 45 and better looking at the time. But it's like, "Oh, I'm going to hug you so hard when we meet." It's like, and he said, "Yes, that's going to be nice." And then Nintendo of Europe did this narration in their Nintendo Direct video broadcast, and it was actually narrated by the CEO of Nintendo of Europe himself. It's a Japanese guy called Shibata-san. Now he's this tall, this short, tall, and he had sort of changed our lives, right? Because he had narrated this, and sales just went up immediately, and we went to #1 in all of the eShops for Nintendo, and I was so happy going to Gamescom in August. We had just released SteamWorld Dig, and it was rolling, and I'm walking through one of those aisles, and there's this small Japanese guy, and I recognize him, and it's Shibata-san, the CEO of Nintendo of Europe. So of course, immediately I just ran towards him and hugged him. I hugged him really hard, and I didn't let go. And then afterwards I explained, I'm Brjann Sigurgeirsson. I'm the guy who made SteamWorld Dig, the game that you narrated. You have completely changed our lives. And he didn't hug me back, really. I can't say that, but he will never forget, right? Are you with me? He'll never forget, right? So hugging someone isn't dangerous. I mean, if you kick them in the groin, it's not good, but hugging someone is just nice. And then after I had hugged him, I got this on this hugging frenzy. So I was supposed to meet Sony at GDC in San Francisco the year after. And then I had long emails explaining in detail how I was going to hug these people when I met them. And what happened, of course, is when I ran into them in a hotel lobby, all of those guys came up and hugged me first. It works. It works. It's not, I mean, it sounds really stupid and childish, but to them, I'm that huggy guy. I'm not going to go away. I'm the guy they think about when they have sex with their wives. Make it personal. Journalists are human beings, and they need friends. You should definitely make sure to establish a relationship with them. As pestering a journalist, if they never answer you back, well, maybe you can write them off after a while. But if they do, don't let them go. Feed them small bits and pieces of information, and they're destined to write about you. Social media is, I think there are 20 rules or something, 20 good rules about social media. This one is the most important, I think. It's like, don't just write stuff. If someone answers, just throw out a question instead and let people come up with their answers or questions, and then ask them something again. And it's like, it becomes very cliche to say that you shouldn't just inform but communicate, but it's really true. If you ask someone something, they're sort of forced to answer you back. Otherwise, they're really rude. And nobody wants to be rude. And then also about social media, have a plan. The thing about Twitter is that it always feels like people are being so spur of the moment. They are really inspired people who can write really intelligent stuff really quickly, just on the top of their heads. But you can plan all these things. You can plan them weeks and months in advance. And you really should, because if you can sort of have interesting content in your social media stream the whole time, you can just watch your following grow, and it's a solid following. It's a following that really wants to play your game at the end. And then make them root for you. Make sure that you are their hero. I did something really stupid where I got a question in a written email interview about why we were making games for Nintendo and Sony and so on. And I was writing that I thought the communities were really die-hard communities. Once they become your fan, they're not gonna stop liking you. I think that is true for any platform. But I was being really stupid, and I was thinking about my mom, who is picking up any game on mobile, and it's not really important to her what she plays. And so I said, I used the phrase real gamers. I said that Nintendo gamers and Sony gamers and so on, traditional platform gamers, are real gamers. That's a really rude and stupid thing to say, actually, because it doesn't mean that my mom is an unreal gamer. She's definitely not unreal. and it's an insult. And there's a forum called NeoGAF. Have you heard of that? It's a really scary forum where when you say something stupid, you're bound to be quoted and hated on NeoGAF for a while. And so I put this. This obviously got onto NeoGAF, and I was being such a stupid asshole who was talking about real gamers. But then before I had a chance to answer anything, the discussion had started among the people on that forum, where they said, no, that's not what he means. What he means is this. It's like, oh, you're such an asshole. Oh, you're such an asshole. Oh. And then by the time I got back and said, listen, I'm sorry if I offended anyone. That's not really what I meant. What I meant is this, blah, blah, blah. Then they attacked me for apologizing. They said, "Oh, you shouldn't apologize to those jerks." And in the end, it turned out all right on NeoGAF. But then, just a couple of days later, the same interview was posted on Nintendo Life, which is a leading Nintendo community site, where it was, of course, accepted the other way around. Where when I was saying that Nintendo gamers are real gamers, suddenly I was everybody's hero there, right? Very, very simple. So what I mean by that is, if you make such a stupid error like I made there, see if you can set it right somehow. I mean, and if you have really controversial opinions, maybe you shouldn't be voicing them everywhere. Or maybe you should. Finally, if you're self-publishing, stagger your releases. And that means come out with your game on one platform first, then start porting the game. If you're as small as we are, it doesn't really make sense to try to come out on all platforms day one. You won't be able to make it. There's the development side of it, but it's also the PR or marketing side where you don't have the muscle to talk to all these communities at once. And you want to sort of if you stagger them with a few months apart, you will get more of a sleeper hit where you get sales for a longer time, but you can also concentrate on telling each community how much you love them, right? And then in the end, it's just you got to remember why you're working with games. I think you guys said it. The only thing you didn't say was because everything else sucks. You really want to make games. But the question is, are you going to make your own games or are you going to make somebody else's game? I think it's very, very, very satisfying to realize my own ideas and our own ideas in the studio. Having a publisher doesn't change that, but just taking assignments from somebody else is never going to, you're not going to fulfill your potential creatively. So I think if you get the chance to make your own game, you will notice how everything else sucks. Question?